What's going on YouTube? Username Kite562 here, and I just got done reading today Stephen King's The Shining. Now, I know I made a little book haul video about Stephen King. I got Salem's Lot and then The Stand, and I'll do an individual review on those later. So anyway, this review of The Shining will contain some spoilers of what I've read, but not enough to ruin it for new readers. So anyway, Stephen King's The Shining is written by Stephen King, and with this version, it is published by Anchor Books. Now, I have to say from the bat, I really enjoyed this story, and this was my first time reading The Shining as a book. I mean, I've seen the miniseries from 1997, and then I've seen bits and pieces of the Jack Nicholson film alongside Shelley Duvall, so it's just, all in all, I really enjoyed the book as a whole, so I've written some notes down of what I've read, so I thought I'd share them with you within a video. So anyway, about Jack Torrance, this is just a little background essay of him that I've written up on my phone, and I thought it was pretty fun, so I thought I'd share it with you guys. As again, this video might have some spoilers, but not too much to ruin it for new readers. So anyway, Jack used to be an English teacher, but he was let go due to hitting a student named George Hatfield. Now, Jack Torrance was an English teacher at Stovington Academy within England, so I just thought that was pretty interesting, and the reason why he hated George Hatfield so much is because, spoiler alert, he slashed his VW's tires, and Jack just ends up pummeling the living crap out of him, and so the faculty let him go. Jack is also an alcoholic, I should mention, so anyway. So after that whole ordeal happens, as again, like I said, Jack Torrance was let go from his job at Stovington Academy, or school, whatever you want to call it. And then his pal Al Shockley ends up getting him the offer in the interview at the Overlook Hotel that he was interviewed by Mr. Stuart Ullman, which Stuart Ullman was the head, or is the head manager of the Overlook Hotel, and he just can't stop gushing about it whatsoever. And it's really interesting to see how some people would obsess over this mysterious place of the Overlook, since it's been so popular within the 20s to 40s, and it was just really interesting to read about the Overlook's mysterious but yet bloody history over the decades as it went on before Jack became the caretaker, in my opinion. So anyway, point number 4, Stuart Ullman, Jack's interviewer or interviewee, tells the gruesome story about Delbert Grady and his family. Now, Delbert Grady was the previous owner who he and his family lived at the Overlook, and he ended up butchering his twin daughters with a hatchet and then murdering his wife with a double-barrel shotgun, and then finally himself. And the way that the book depicted it alone is it really surprised me. And I know they kind of rushed through it briefly within the Kubrick film, but I really preferred it more in the book at how well paced and well detailed it was. So I thought that was a pretty fun experience, and it really sent a little shiver down my spine. I cannot talk today, but that was a really joyous moment. So anyway, point number 5. When Jack was an infant, so at 3 years old, Jack ends up breaking his arm for spilling beer on his manuscript for the play The Little School. Now, I don't remember the exact details, so I didn't want to write too many details on this play, but anyway, this book alone is divided up into 5 parts, kind of like a play. And if I remember correctly, Jack's play, The Little School, was also divided up into 5 or 6 parts. So I thought that was a neat little detail. I don't know why the book was formatted like that. If you know, please let me know down in the comments below. So anyway, to to wrap this part up of my review, I have to say the first 81 pages were confusing to me as a reader, but as I went on to the first 100, it really started to flow better, and the characters themselves just really started to flesh out more to me with each and every page turn. Okay, so my notes for part 2. The Torrance family finally makes it to the Overlook, and again, thanks to Al Shockley. I think Al was Jack's brother-in-law, or he could be a good family friend since Al was a drinking buddy of Jack's, and they're pretty much basically family. So it's just, I thought it was a really interesting thing that Al has a more deeper connection with the Overlook than what Jack has, so it's just a really interesting dynamic as the story goes on. So anyway, as the pages were flipped, the Torrances finally make it to the Overlook Hotel, which looks seemingly innocent and unharming at first, but as the Torrances start to settle in, strange things start occurring. Like Danny himself starts to see strange visions of a man in a pool of his own blood with strange little gray spackles spattered on the walls of the presidential suite. So what could this mean? Who knows? Read The Shining to find out. Okay. So, as the Torrance family continues to settle into Jack's new position as the caretaker of the Overlook Hotel for the winter season, and Mr. Ullman wants Jack's family to be out by, if I remember correctly, May 1st. So then, Dick Halloran, the chef of the Overlook, tries to show them the ins and outs of the kitchen, how much food stock is in the pantry, and he shows them how the boiler works and everything, just all the ins and outs. And then there's also this other caretaker named Watson. But then Dick finally calls Danny by his nickname, which is Doc, which is kind of a take on Bugs Bunny, you know, what's up, Doc? So I thought it was really interesting. But as him and Danny have a conversation within his car, Dick Halloran hasn't seen anybody with such a high level of a shining ability like Danny's that he's ever seen before. Like, I remember Dick would always have constant conversations, full-on conversations without saying a single word to his grandmother when he was younger, and I thought that was just a really interesting take alone. So anyway, for my point number 3 of part 2 of this review is Dick warns Danny about room 217 and the dangers that might lurk within it. Now, 217, you take 17 plus 2, it adds up to 19. It has some sort of significance to the Dark Tower. I don't know, I've never read the Dark Tower, but if you've seen the Kubrick film, it's room 237 in that, but room 217 in the book. So there's a little difference for you, but I'm not going to tell you what dangers lie within that room itself. Again, go read the book or watch the Kubrick film. There's many different ways you can enjoy The Shining. There's the miniseries from 1997, the Kubrick film from 1980, or the book. And I have to say, I really enjoyed this read for my 3rd Stephen King novel read. So anyway, for my last point of my part 2 notes is that all the characters introduced were really fleshed out in this chapter, and I should also mention Dick also told Danny that some smaller people might have a small sense of The Shining, like this one maid who thought she saw something in room 17, but once she mentioned it to a manager, she was let go, fired essentially. So I thought that was really interesting. Could Wendy have some sort of shining ability? Who knows? Okay, so for my part 3 notes, Zach Toomey and Al Shockley were alcoholics together with Jack, and it's just really interesting because Zach, there was like one point that really stood out to me as a reader. He would buy a keg, stick it into the snow, buy it on Friday, and then ended up finishing it off on Sunday from watching football games and old movies. So I thought that was a pretty funny scenario within this book, just my opinion. So, but again, too much of a good thing can lead to chaotic results, in my opinion. But as this goes on, we see Jack Torrance, tell himself that he's a nice guy, and I assume this was like during his high school years. So as this book goes on, it kind of flashes back and forth between character perspectives and everything. So I just thought that was really interesting. Like, we get to see Jack's point of view from when he was a toddler to a teenager. Like, one scene comes to mind where he threw a rock at a moving car into traffic, and then his father beat the crap out of him, beat his butt red, and then gave him a black eye to boot. And Mark Anthony Torrance, as a father, in my opinion, worthless piece of shit. Just gonna say that outright. Mark Anthony Torrance, that whole Kane scene at the dinner table, whew, that's gonna be in my mind for a while. So, yeah. So anyway, point number 3. Jack grew up in an abusive home. His father was an alcoholic and a piece of shit, like I've said before a couple seconds ago, and it really blows my mind at how well detailed King can, write out scenes without any illustrations to boot. And I just kept on getting pulled in back and forth from different perspectives of the characters, like from Danny's perspective, from Dick's perspective, and it's just really wonderful. But what really helped me enjoy the story is just I mainly focused on the main trio of the Torrance family, from Jack's perspective to Wendy's perspective, and then finally from Danny's perspective, because The Shining itself is Danny Torrance's story, pretty much, of like seeing his father change and develop over time as they stay at the Overlook. But I'm not going to say anything more than that. It's really phenomenal at how King can bounce from one perspective to another, and it's just an absolute delight to see the sheer terror pour out of this book, and it just really blew my mind at how everything started to slowly click together, and it's just really wonderful. So finally, number 5. Jack thinks about the time where he cut George Hatfield from the debate team because of his stutter. So in this scenario, he, set the timer up just so George could speed up, but then Jack cut him from the debate team because of his stutter, and he was taking too long, and once George would get too excited, his stutter would start appearing, and then George would accuse Jack of cutting him because of his stutter, so that ends up leaving George to cut his teacher's tires, Jack's tires, of his VW Volkswagen Beetle, and then the beatdown happens, and then Jack loses his job, and then now we're finally at the Overlook. And again, I just found this a really interesting way to bounce perspectives from left and right. And then you also get some trippy moments with Danny and his shining abilities, but I'm not going to say anything more than that. I'm trying to keep this review as spoiler-free as possible, but this book just really surprised me from the get-go. But again, I will admit, the first 81 pages of this book were really confusing to me, but it really, redeemed itself in the end. It really sticks with me now, and I can realize what makes The Shining so great of a horror story itself. So, my overall thoughts on this section, it's well-rounded characters with the Torrance family, the dynamic between Jack, Wendy, and then Danny, and they both slowly start to see Jack becomes something that he's not really not due to mysterious circumstances, and I'll just leave it that vague. So, there. It's really surprising. And then my next point on top of that, this book really captures isolation so well once the winter storm hits. Or cabin fever, I should say, like with Delbert Grady's situation. He was snowed in with his family, and then he ended up, again, butchering his twin daughters with a hatchet, and then ends up killing his wife with a shotgun, and then ends up committing suicide on himself with the same said shotgun. So, anywho, the scenarios with Danny and the room 217 just really sent shivers down my spine. Just the whole scenario with Mrs. Massey, or the mysterious woman I should call her within this review, is just, it's living in my mind head free. Just the sheer detail of those moments, it just really creeps me out. And again, I'm a guy who loves horror. It takes a lot to scare me. So, good job on you, Mr. King. And I also have to say, for my point number 6, Mark Anthony Torrance, Jack Torrance's father, is a pretty piss-poor excuse of a human being. I mean, he really pisses me off with how he treats people in this book. I mean, Jack's siblings hate him to the core, and again, that whole dinner table scene with the cane is just still vividly in my mind. I mean, I can just recall it back just like that. So, it's just really phenomenal and just really surprising to see. Okay, so point number 7. The Overlook itself feels like a living, breathing entity as you go through and through with the book. And it's just really surprising. Take, for example, the Spencer Mansion from the Resident Evil remake. You don't know what's really looking within these walls until you delve deeper within it. And that's what the Overlook itself gave me within this book. I have to say, the playground scene with Danny really spooked me, and then Jack's experience with the topiary hedge animals just really sent another shiver up my spine, and it's just really great. Wendy doesn't know what the heck to do, and we kind of see how she deals with everything, and then both her and Jack have to deal with Danny's shining ability scenarios, especially with the whole bathroom situation where Danny locked himself in the bathroom, and then he was just in almost a catatonic state. So they thought he was an epileptic, so they just took him to the doctor. Just call me Bill Edmonds. So I thought he was a pretty cool character, or side character I should say. Like, I have to say, within this review, Dr. Edmonds and then Dick Halloran were my two favorite characters within this, and then Danny, seeing his experience with the Overlook really made me worry for him, and I hope he can heal up as time goes on. I haven't read Dr. Sleep yet, but I really look forward to. Again, I have Salem's Lot and The Stand to read, so I'm definitely going to post it here on the channel. It's just, I really enjoyed this book. So anyway, my overall thoughts on this, finally, point number 8. It's a really great story within this book. It's a nice, slow burn pace, and it really keeps you guessing. It keeps on taking you from perspective to perspective. Like, there's one moment that I didn't know if it was an actual event, and where Jack and Al were driving on the highway and they end up hitting a bike or running over it. I just don't know if that was a dream or that was a reality. It really kept me guessing, really kept me on my toes, and it just really kept me reading as an individual experience. But I have to say, this book was really solid for my third ever Stephen King book that I've read, and I highly recommend The Shining by Stephen King. So, at the end of the day, I give The Shining an 8.9 out of 10 as a book alone. So, yeah, that's my spoilerish free review of The Shining. This is Kite562 signing out. Leave a like, comment. What was your favorite part about The Shining? Let me know down in the comments below. Anyway, this is Kite562 signing out, and as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, everybody. Later.